This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, June 3rd. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. Following last week's military coup in Mali, the African Union on Tuesday suspended the country from its membership just days after the West African regional bloc ECOWAS suspended Mali's membership. We get more from this report by Reuters.
The African Union has suspended Mali's membership in response to last week's military coup and is threatening sanctions if a civilian-led government isn't restored. The military arrested interim President Baton Dor and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane last week and pressured them to resign, derailing a transition to democratic elections. That was after another military coup last August ousted the previous administration. Former Vice President Assimi Goïta, a colonel who led the August coup and last week's revolt, was declared president on Friday. The African Union is calling for, quote, an unimpeded, transparent and swift return to the civilian-led transition, failing which it wouldn't hesitate to impose targeted sanctions. Mali's neighbors and international powers fear the latest revolt will dash promises to hold a presidential election in February and undermine a regional fight against Islamist militants, some of which are based in Mali's desert north. The African Union suspended Mali after last August coup, but reinstated the country a few weeks later after the heads of the new civilian-led transitional government were announced.
That was a Reuters Media report. Mali has seen continued political instability since the ouster of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta last August, and just last week, the military detained the interim president, Baton Dor, and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane, forcing them to resign. For more insight on Mali's leadership crisis, I spoke to Aristide Sidibe, a Malian political analyst.
The political instability in Mali, in my opinion, stem from the fact of the ouster of the Libyan dictator a few years ago, and the failure of the international community to anticipate that those foreign elements that were part of the Libyan army at the time, the return of those elements into their country of origin, namely Mali and Niger. And this is, to me, the main factor of the political instability in Mali.
We now have seen ECOWAS convene a meeting, and now they have suspended Mali's membership from the regional bloc, but is that enough?
I think that they couldn't do anything else, to be honest with you, because we all remember the death of President Déby in Chad and the military takeover in that country. And the international community did not talk about any sanction. And it will be very difficult to have a double standard when it comes to Mali.
We also saw that Assimi Goïta, who led the coup, was invited to the ECOWAS meeting. What does this mean? Does it also mean that ECOWAS supports him?
You know, it was very interesting that they invited Goïta to the summit. But to me, it seemed from the fact that the current leadership of the ECOWAS, the president of Ghana, has a different style. And I think that he wanted to have some kind of due process to show that whatever decision they will be making will be fair, and they will have to listen to Goïta and his side of the story.
What did he bring to the table?
To me, it does bring some stability. And the reason I say that is the international community made a mistake thinking that a civilian-led transition could bring some normalcy during the transition. But as we saw in Mali, it kind of brought us back to what happened in 2012. Remember, President Traoré, John Kunda Traoré, was beaten up in the president palace because of the fact the type of arrangement ECOWAS put in place to have a power sharing. And I think that we did not learn from that lesson. And to me, letting him finish up the transition will bring some stability.
What do you make of the fact that ECOWAS is demanding the nomination of a new civilian prime minister and a new inclusive government as the way forward in the transition, at the same time having Assimi Goïta present in that meeting?
Requiring a civilian-led prime minister is just reading the facts on the ground. And in fact, leading up to that summit, Goïta offered the premiership to the M5 movement. So there was a consensus already that was building up in Mali prior to the summit.
Does West Africa as a region have a military agreement for multinational support to restore order in Mali or any other country in the region for that matter?
A few years ago, ECOWAS sent troops in Sierra Leone, and that was a different time and different reality. Mali's situation is complex. The MINUSMA is in Mali, which is basically a 15,000 troops, and we have different troops in Mali, and I don't think that adding ECOWAS troop will make any difference.
Then what will it take to stabilize Mali?
Is for the international community to acknowledge that the solution needs to come from Mali. It should not be the case that the international community will impose solution in Malians. And that is something that needs to be looked at if we want to make sure that Mali come back to the rule of law.
Do you think that the West should step in, and France for that matter, because France has been very much involved in what's going on in the West African region, and including fighting jihadists in the Sahel region?
France is already involved, Esther. In fact, there's a growing sense of a good segment of Malian population asking for a withdrawal of French troops. So the priority should be to make sure that Malian security forces are able to control the territory and then put in place reform that will allow Malians to vote to elect a president they all feel confident will lead the country.
How are Malians in the diaspora reacting to the upheaval in the country?
The Malian diaspora would like to have an inclusive partnership with foreign entity to be able to steer the debate within Mali into reform that are built from the ground up instead of being imposed by the Western world. So that's, in general, the consensus among the Malian diaspora.
Aristide Sidibe is a Malian political analyst based in the U.S. state of Texas. International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda has asked Sudan's government to hand over Ahmed Haroun, a key suspect in war crimes committed in Darfur and a close ally of ousted President Omar Al Bashir. According to Reuters Media, Bensouda told a press conference in Sudan Wednesday that the I.C.C. is willing to negotiate with the government of Sudan on where the trial of Bashir should take place.
You asked about Omar Al Bashir. He's one of those people who've been indicted by the I.C.C. And as I have explained, the engagement that we are doing with the government is to ensure that those who are wanted by the I.C.C. are transferred to the I.C.C. And I think I've explained already that we are starting with Haroun for the reasons I've already given. But that doesn't mean that we don't want the others. No, it's just that it started, the engagement has started, but those who already have warrants of arrest issued against them by the I.C.C., what we are engaged with the government at the moment is to have those individuals transferred to the I.C.C.
I.C.C. Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda speaking to reporters in Sudan. Hundreds of Zimbabweans protested Wednesday about a shortage of COVID-19 vaccines as the country awaits more doses from China. The government wants to inoculate at least 60% of Zimbabwe's more than 14 million people by the end of the year, but has struggled to get the necessary supplies. A crowd demanded to see authorities and began to protest the vaccine shortages, but dispersed upon hearing police were on their way. On Tuesday, Zimbabwe's Junior Health Minister, Dr. John Mangwiro, refused to comment about the shortages, but told state-controlled media that the government would redistribute COVID-19 vaccines from areas with lower demand to those where uptake has been high to ease the shortfalls. He said Zimbabwe still had more than 400,000 doses from the 1.7 million COVID-19 vaccines received from China, Russia, and India since February. Last week, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, the World Health Organization Director for Africa, appealed for at least 20 million vaccines of second doses for everyone who received their first shots on the continent to curtail a potential third wave of COVID-19. Zimbabwe has 38,998 confirmed coronavirus infections and just under 1,600 deaths, according to Johns Hopkins University, which tracks the global outbreak. Nigeria's state government confirmed late Wednesday that 136 children were abducted from an Islamic school in the north-central Niger state on Sunday. Niger State Deputy Governor Ahmed Mohamed Kesso said the number was lower than the 200 previously reported by the federal government. Angela Okumadu of Reuters has more.
Nigerian police are trying to track the route kidnappers took with about 200 children that were seized in a raid on an Islamic school. The attack took place in north-central Niger State. The authorities have ruled out paying a ransom. Officials say a warplane was also flying over the area to try to spot them, while worried parents waited for news. Gunmen on motorbikes attacked the town on Sunday. One person was shot dead during the attack and another seriously injured. A local governor said they were trying to negotiate to see if the children could be returned. More than 700 students have been kidnapped for ransom since December, taken by armed groups after raids on schools and universities in Nigeria's violent north. While the government denies paying ransoms, it is widely believed they have in the past.
Angela Okumadu of Reuters filed that report. Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. Our address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, Minnesota prosecutors seek a 30-year sentence for former police officer Derek Chauvin, convicted of the murder of George Floyd in May 2019. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. The lawyer for former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who was convicted in April for murder and manslaughter in the 2020 death of George Floyd, has asked the courts to limit Chauvin's prison sentence to only probation and time already served. Prosecutors in that Minnesota city are seeking a 30-year sentence for Chauvin, who knelt on George Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes until his death, after he had already been taken in police custody. Judge Peter Cahill ruled that there were aggravating circumstances in Floyd's murder, giving him discretion to sentence Chauvin to a term longer than regular state guidelines. In Minnesota, 12.5 years is the average sentence for a first offense case like Chauvin, but prosecutors said that 30 years would more properly account for the profound impact of defendants' conduct on the victim's family, and the community. The most serious count against Chauvin, its second-degree murder, carries a maximum sentence of 40 years. Chauvin's sentencing is scheduled for June 25th. He has been in jail since his April 20 conviction and faces separate federal civil rights charges in Floyd's death. Floyd's murder inspired global protests against institutionalized racism and police practices, particularly in the United States. President Joe Biden is launching a month-long nationwide push to get 70% of American adults vaccinated by Independence Day on July 4th. But the administration has not yet outlined its vaccine sharing strategy with the rest of the world. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has this report.
With 170 million people vaccinated, life in the U.S. is starting to feel more normal. The country is going even further with a month-long nationwide push to get 70% of adults vaccinated by Independence Day.
If you get a shot this week, you can be fully vaccinated by July 4th, by the week of July the 4th. And you can celebrate Independence Day free from fear or worry.
On Wednesday, President Joe Biden announced initiatives including free child care for parents getting their shot, free rights vaccination sites, recruiting barbershops and beauty shops to help with outreach, and encouraging companies to provide vaccination incentives.
Free beer for everyone 21 years or over to celebrate the independence from the virus.
As Americans are getting free perks for their free shots, a study by the Duke Global Health Innovation Center shows the U.S. is on track to have hundreds of millions of excess vaccine doses by July.
We have committed to 600 million doses in this country. 366 million have been distributed. We should look to see if we're going to have excess capacity over the next few months. The 80 million, mostly AstraZeneca, that has been committed globally, we need to make sure that gets out quickly, it gets out equitably.
The administration is facing mounting pressure to announce when and how it will share excess doses.
We'll focus on equity, on the equitable distribution of vaccines. We'll focus on science. We'll work in coordination with COVAX.
COVAX is the United Nations mechanism to ensure lower and middle-income countries have access to vaccines.
The COVAX ANC can help put us on another path in which we defeat this virus together.
On Wednesday, a virtual summit hosted by Japan and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, secured an additional $2.4 billion funding for COVAX, bringing the total to nearly $9.6 billion. The U.S. participated but did not announce additional contributions.
The United States has contributed $2 billion to Gavi for COVAX, and we have pledged an additional $2 billion through 2022.
The administration is also considering sending doses to individual countries. Many have requested, including South Korea, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. The White House has not announced its response. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
In 2008, a family murder-suicide horrified Detroit. 2 decades later, one of the surviving daughters is telling her story of survival and efforts to help others. Burim Guzuli has the story.
Valentina Djelaj was born in the suburbs of Detroit, the daughter of ethnic Albanian immigrants from Montenegro. She recalls her parents working hard to give their 4 children a better life and a good education. But her childhood was far from normal.
My father physically and emotionally abused my mother my entire life. And that was something that I didn't understand. At times, my mother ended up in the hospital. My father ended up in jail. You know, domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It happens in every culture, no matter where you are in the world.
Djelaj buried herself in schoolwork as a way of coping. Then in 2008, as her mother tried to end the marriage after years of suffering, Djelaj's father fatally shot his wife and killed himself with the same gun.
I believe what triggered this was my mother actually separated from my father for about 6 months before this ultimately happened. And during that time, my father grew extremely depressed and angry and lost a lot of power and control.
Djelaj says her mother, 38-year-old Maria Djelaj, tried to get a restraining order, but a judge denied the request during a hearing in which the abuse claims were not discussed. The murder-suicide took place 9 days later.
Judges failed my mother. People not believing failed my mother and continue to fail women everywhere.
Then an 18-year-old college student. She went to live on her own while her grandparents took in the youngest siblings.
I grew stronger and I grew motivated to help the world understand that no one does anything to deserve domestic violence, to deserve to be murdered.
Today, Djelaj is a program director at a healthcare organization and works against domestic violence in her Albanian American community in Michigan. Her husband, Marko Ruggeri, also helps.
We are in a beautiful, healthy relationship. Marriage isn't scary when you know you are being treated as an equal. You feel loved and supported.
Burim Gojuli for VOA News, Washington.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has called on Central American leaders to tackle corruption, poverty, and drug trafficking to improve the lives of their citizens and stem migration to the United States. Blinken made the appeal in Costa Rica, where he met with the region's leaders, as VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken praised his host in Costa Rica for their strong commitment to democratic values, but indicated good governance would also be crucial to tackle the root causes of migration to the U.S. from the poverty and violence-stricken Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador.
We meet at a moment when democracy and human rights are being undermined in many parts of the region. We see this in the erosion of judicial independence, the crackdown on independent media and NGOs, the barring of political opponents, the quashing of anti-corruption efforts.
Tensions have flared between the Biden administration and the Northern Triangle countries after Congress released a State Department list last week identifying 16 current and former senior officials from these countries as allegedly involved in drug trafficking or corruption. In March, Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez's brother was sentenced to life in prison in New York for extensive drug trafficking after a trial that also implicated the president himself. Relations took another hit when El Salvador President Nayib Bukele fired the country's attorney general and Supreme Court magistrates. These developments, experts say, make it difficult for the Biden administration to administer the $4 billion in aid it has pledged to the region.
The Biden administration is rightly committed to addressing these structural problems in these countries that cause people to leave their villages and their homes and to flee to the United States. But to do so, it finds itself forced to work with governments that are not committed to the same values: transparency, fighting corruption, human rights, having transparent and effective democratic institutions. And so they're constantly having to recalibrate and balance how you engage in these countries.
In the face of food insecurity, exacerbated by 2 major hurricanes in the region last year, some experts say the Biden administration needs to think even bigger and broader than the usual foreign aid package.
And that's why I focus on trying to wrap the Caribbean basin into some of President Biden's bigger domestic initiatives. So he's talking about spending, gobs of money on infrastructure development, roads, ports, airports, et cetera, in the United States. Why not think of the Caribbean basin as our near abroad?
Blinken's visit paves the way for Vice President Kamala Harris' upcoming trip to the region, where she is tasked by President Joe Biden with addressing the root causes of migration. Last week, Harris invited business leaders to the White House to push for private sector investment in Central America.
We have MasterCard, who intends to partner across sectors to bring 5 million people in the region into the digital economy and to support 1 million small businesses. I'm excited to report that Microsoft will work with local partners to expand broadband access for up to 3 million people in the region in the next year. I'm pleased to report that Nespresso will expand coffee sourcing activities in Guatemala and start in Honduras and El Salvador.
Harris plans to visit Guatemala and Mexico next week on her first trip abroad as vice president. Migration from Central America is a thorny political issue for the administration, with Republicans faulting the president and vice president for failing to end what they call a crisis at the U.S. southern border. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Instead of a smartphone to access apps and a navigation system, a tech company is creating smart glass that can be used in windshields and windows to see virtual objects and information through augmented reality. VOA's Elizabeth Lee has the details.
At the next light, take a slight right turn.
Getting directions from a mobile phone may be helpful, but the driver still looks away from the road to consult a map on a small screen. What if the entire windshield is the navigation device as a safer way to navigate?
We can create 3D images far away from a human, and they could be visible through a specific sort of glass. We call it holographic glass.
The Swiss company Weiray has created a unique film. When embedded between two pieces of glass, imitates a lens. When combined with software and laser projection mounted in the car's dashboard, the driver can see augmented reality, virtual information through the windshield, which is unlike other augmented reality experiences that can only be seen through special glasses or headsets, says Weiray founder Vitaly Ponomarov.
We're using diffraction to reflect the light directly on humans' retina, so it looks like a real 3D object as it was in real world. So we simulate how the real object would have emitted the light.
In addition to navigation, the windshield can also display safety information that detects other cars, pedestrians, or objects, primarily using data from sensors that already exist in cars. But Weiray's technology is not just limited to a car windshield. From the windows of airplanes to trains and buildings, augmented reality is possible with any transparent surface. In the future, users could play games, access social media, learn information about what they are seeing all through the holographic displays on the glass. Weiray's founder expects augmented reality windshields to be found in some new cars sometime around 2023. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us in Washington, thanks for watching.